Hello, I'm Timothy Schmaltz, and I welcome you to my podcast series, When in Rome, Touch the Art. Here we'll get to know my sculptures installed in Rome, their history, and their meaning. In this episode, I introduce my sculpture, When I Was Sick. There's one passage of scripture that I think is appropriate that kind of relates to Catholic artwork. It's the parable where it's when Jesus mentioned that you don't light a candle and put it under a bed, you put it on a pedestal so the light will shine. And I think that being an artist, you need to have that pedestal place where your artwork can shine, where people can see it. And so I'm always looking for great locations to install pieces that will evangelize for centuries to come, and to put our faith artistically on that pedestal so it can shine, so people can see it. I think one of the big problems within our spiritual, religious culture today is that we are almost invisible. The mass media tries to make us invisible. So it's great to have artwork, sculpture that will last centuries, cast in bronze, to be placed in areas where they're always that visual reminder. They're always that constant reminder of some of the most important things within our faith. And so these are spiritual cues. These are in a sense billboards. You have McDonald's very close to here. They got their billboards. We need to create aggressively a face to our faith that people will see. I always feel that my sculptures aren't done till they're installed. Then they start working. Then they start doing what they do. Preach the messages that are embedded within the Bible. Here, right beside the Tiber River, Casa d'Angelo is over here in the center of Rome on Vatican Hill, is When I Was Sick, You Visited Me, in front of one of the oldest hospitals in the world. To have this sculpture here is very powerful. The hand is reaching out to everyone walking by, in a sense, beckoning them for a moment of reflection about the idea of human compassion. When I was sick, you visited me, part of Matthew 25, where it suggests that it's our spiritual duty to visit the sick. It's a fascinating, I think, a passage in the Bible, because you have feeding the hungry, giving thirst to the thirsty, but then also visiting the sick. It's a spiritual duty. To have this sculpture here was an amazing moment within this piece. Although it's installed in many different places around the world, this must be the special place, because it's at Santo Spirito Hospital. This is the hospital where it actually became considered part of the church to help the sick, which is phenomenal. The history here is absolutely unbelievable. It was difficult to create this sculpture, because how do you represent a sick person, making sure it's not interpreted as a dead person? So here I have the twist of the knee, the agony represented with the hand over the face, and then the visiting me with the hand reaching out. So many people walk by here, including me, grab that hand and say a prayer for those that they know that are sick to get better. It's a fascinating reach out of artwork within the Eternal City, beckoning people, pulling people into the scripture. When I create these sculptures, I create them in my studio, which I like to call a chapel. It's a spiritual place. Hopefully when they're launched out there in the world, they are these visual prayers that come out. We can't just limit prayers to on Sunday in a set way. We have to, I think, open up the idea that prayer comes in many different forms, many different expressions. Therefore, allowing people that entrance within that spirituality. To have sculptures that are prayers, visual prayers, out in a city, I think is exactly what we need to take our secular society and, in a sense, wake them up to that spiritual vocabulary that they are absolutely hungry starving to find. By visiting the sick people, you're comforting people that feel absolutely isolated. Oftentimes, pre-Christian society, if someone was sick, they would be outcasts. They would be considered evil. The devil is cursing them. And so the Christian church, by saying, no, no, you have to visit the sick. They're not evil. God is not punishing them. And I think that this is a very important movement within the church to counter what was previously in pre-Christian periods of time where the sick were outcast. They were absolutely disgraced and put out of society. Christianity came in and it said, not only are sick people not from the devil, but they're also people that you should visit. And it's interesting because I think when we visit the sick, we in a sense visit our own mortality. We have this idea that now we're going to live forever, we're invincible, we're gods ourselves. When you visit the sick, when you go to a hospital, it grounds you. It makes you understand reality, that we are here for a short period of time. And also the idea of suffering. It's part of our vocabulary as human beings. To pretend that's not, to not visit the sick, to remove yourself from human suffering, you also remove yourself from being human. Is a slow reveal. That's why I have the hand, the arm covering the face. So at first it could be anyone. And it's only through seeing the wounds on the hand and the feet does the Christ reveal himself. Just like Matthew 25, it's not blatantly put forward that it's Jesus. There is that ambiguity. And this sculpture reveals that, very consistent to the text. The idea of having the hand reaching out is suggesting a desire to connect to people. Jesus is with them. In Matthew 25, Christ says, when you visit the sick, you are visiting me. And so I think that it's important to see this sculpture through the eyes of the people that are sick, to realize that Christ is there with them, not only by their side, but actually a part of them. And I think it's very, very important to have that message, and this sculpture represents that as well. 6 years to create, 6 years. How do you represent when I was sick, you visited me? At first, I had modern medical equipment around, and I thought, well, the sculpture is going to be here for centuries. The equipment will change. I wanted to make it simple. And I realized that in order to make this sculpture work, a universal sense, I couldn't have anything but the human form, but the Jesus figure. And so what I did was I created the expression, the gesture, the positioning to show the agony, to show the suffering, but also to show the desire to be connected. This sculpture, I think, was a challenge for me to use the human form to express something, just the human form. But I love the drapery on it too. The blanket creates movement within the piece, and it accentuates the whole expression of the figure that's underneath. You can grab the hand, you can touch it. It's meant to be touched, it's meant to be approached. Person to sculpture. That relationship, I think, is very important, to have the figures life size. Although I've created smaller versions of these that are on people's desks, etc. This is, I think, the powerful size, and that's the beauty of sculpture. Oftentimes think that sculpture is one of the most powerful forms of artwork because people can relate to it very easily. They are human beings. They possess the body. The sculpture looks similar to them. So it's speaking that universal language when you have a life-size figure here. The other locations around the world, I just recently installed this sculpture in Hong Kong. I'm actually right now creating one for Spain and Bethlehem. There's a connection of the pieces to the locations in a sense. And that's, I think, another layer of meaning that comes upon the sculpture when they are installed in different places around the world. There's that unification of the pieces. They're all connected in a sense. So Hong Kong is in a sense connected to Santo Spirito through artwork. It's much more, it warrants more than just one sculpture. So what I decided to do was take each different aspect of Matthew 25 and create a standalone sculpture of each of those. And I'm not done yet. Right now in my studio, I'm working on the corporal works of mercy that has another interpretation of this. Why do so many sculptures on Scripture? Because I do not think we can have enough reminders out there in the world of these key important parts of the Bible that teach us how to live, how to be moral, and how in the end to have a good life. Soft, subtle way that I think it sticks with you. It's not over the top. The representation is a quiet representation. And in a sense, ironically, that makes the message all the more stronger. And I think more poetic too. Understood as not only physical sick, but mental sick. The idea of having the sculpture here in a city center where a lot of homeless people stay, a lot of homeless people are suffering from mental illness. I think this sculpture addresses that very much so, that the idea of the sickness, the illness, is not just with a wound or a cut on the foot with a bandage wrapped around it. A lot of people are suffering. A lot of people have illnesses that are not overtly visible. This sculpture, I think, addresses those illnesses as well as the idea of addiction. And so to have the sculpture here in a busy street in Rome, I think is very important. It's reaching out. As you can see, the hand is reaching out to the sidewalk. It's beckoning people to come in. It's pulling people in to this idea of Matthew 25, the idea that it's a spiritual duty to visit the sick. And I really do think that, and my hope is that more places install this sculpture. We need as many reminders as possible of the sacredness of all human life and our spiritual duties to our brothers and sisters.
So far, today's chapter of When in Rome, Touch the Art by Timothy Schmaltz. Thank you for joining me this far. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Meanwhile, follow me on my social media.
Thanks to the Hospital of Santo Espiritu. When in Rome, Touch the Art is a production by Lamashi Communication for Good Causes. Executive producer, Juan de la Torre. Voiceover, Timothy Schmaltz. Camera, Lorenzo Mejia. Editor, Mauricio Ramirez. Design, Mauricio Ramirez. Sound, Lorenzo Mejia.